Your silence is not what they think it is. They think you went quiet because you gave up. They are wrong. You went quiet because you started aiming. Right now, somewhere in your chest, there is a sentence you have stopped saying out loud. Maybe it's an argument you used to have every week and now you just nod. Maybe it's a defense of yourself you used to give strangers and now you let them believe whatever they want. Maybe it's a plan you used to announce at every dinner and now you don't mention it at all. People noticed. They said you got quiet. They said something changed. Something did change. You stopped performing your fight, and you started building it. Stay with me for the next 30 minutes, because I am going to tell you exactly what happened to you, why it happened, and why it is the most dangerous thing about you now, dangerous to the people who counted on you staying loud and losing. You are here because somewhere, someone called your silence weakness. A parent. An ex. A boss. A version of yourself at 3 a.m. They said you used to have fire and now you just absorb things. They said you used to fight back and now you just take it. They are measuring you with the wrong instrument. Noise was never your strength. It just looked like strength because it was visible. What you have now doesn't perform. It aims. By the end of this, you will know the difference between going silent because you broke, and going silent because you loaded. You will know which one you did. And you will know what to do next. This is LifeForge. Let's begin. The voice. There is a voice in you that talks the moment you go quiet. It doesn't wait for you to speak, it fills the space you left behind. It says, you didn't say anything because you had nothing to say. It says, the old you would have answered that. It says, you're losing your edge. That voice has a name, even if you've never named it. Psychologists call it the inner critic. It sounds like your own voice, in your own head, using your own memories against you. That's what makes it convincing. It's not a stranger's accusation. It's yours, or it sounds like yours. Here is the truth about that voice, it was not born in this moment. It is old. It is often older than you can remember. It was assembled, piece by piece, out of every room where staying quiet kept you safe and every room where speaking up got you punished. A teacher who mocked you for asking the wrong question. A parent who needed you smaller to feel bigger. A partner who called your calm, checking out, because your calm made your feelings harder to control. Somewhere in there, a rule got written, silence means you lost. That rule made sense once. It might have even protected you once. A kid who stays quiet in a house with a temper survives more dinners. A student who stays quiet in a classroom that punishes wrong answers gets through more years. The voice was installed as armor. It is not lying about its origin. It is lying about its current use. Because here's what the voice never tells you, it can't tell the difference between the you of 10 years ago and the you of right now. It runs the same tape. Old danger, old defense. It doesn't update. It doesn't watch you grow. It just replays the moment you first learned that speaking cost you something, and it applies that lesson to every quiet moment since, whether or not it fits. So when you go quiet now, not from fear, but from focus, the voice panics. It mistakes your discipline for your old defeat. It says, you're doing the thing again, the thing where you disappear. It cannot tell that this time you didn't disappear. You retreated on purpose, to a place where you could see the whole board. Listen to how it talks. It talks fast. It talks in absolutes. Always, never, everyone, no one. It doesn't ask questions, it delivers verdicts. Real thought is slower than that. Real thought considers. The voice doesn't consider, it convicts. That's how you know it isn't reasoning with you. It's reacting through you, using borrowed material from rooms you don't live in anymore. You have to understand something about where you are right now, in this exact chapter of your life. You are not the person the voice keeps referencing. You've had 10 more years of practice reading people since that classroom. You've had a decade of watching who wins the shouting matches and who wins the outcomes, and noticing they are almost never the same person. The voice hasn't caught up. It's still filing reports from a war that ended. This matters because the voice will try to convince you that your silence right now is retreat. It will point at your quiet and say, "See, you're scared again." But scared and strategic look identical from the outside. They are not identical on the inside. Scared has no plan behind it. Strategic has a plan it isn't ready to say out loud yet. Ask yourself, honestly, which one you're doing. Not what the voice says you're doing, what you're actually doing. Are you quiet because you have nothing, or are you quiet because you have something you're not finished building? Because there's a difference between a mind that's empty and a mind that's loading. An empty mind panics in the silence. A loading mind uses it. The voice wants you to fill every silence with proof. Answer immediately. Defend immediately. React immediately. Because a fast reaction feels like strength, it looks like you're still in the fight. But a fast reaction is often just the fastest way to lose. You don't beat a chess player by moving the second they finish their turn. You beat them by seeing 3 moves further than they did. That takes time. That takes quiet. That looks, to an untrained eye, exactly like doing nothing. You are not doing nothing. You stopped narrating your moves. That's not the same thing. Here's the part that matters most. The voice needs you to believe silence is shameful, because a person who is ashamed of their quiet will rush to fill it with anything, bad decisions, bad defenses, bad deals, just to make the shame stop. A person who understands their quiet has no reason to rush. And a person who doesn't rush is much harder to beat, in a negotiation, in an argument, in a life. So the next time that voice tells you your silence means you've got nothing left, check the evidence. Not the old tape. The current one. What have you actually built, in the quiet, that you haven't announced yet? I promise you, there's more there than the voice wants you to see. The voice's whole job is to keep you from noticing your own reload. You are not out of ammunition. You are out of the habit of narrating the reload. Those are 2 very different problems, and only one of them should scare you. The lie. Let's talk about what fear actually is, underneath the story you've been telling yourself about it. Fear is not a verdict on your worth. Fear is a body doing its job badly out of context. Your nervous system was built for a world with far fewer choices and far more immediate threats. It cannot tell the difference between a predator in the grass and a hard conversation you're avoiding on a Tuesday. Both trigger the same cascade, heart rate up, breath short, blood moving to your limbs and away from the parts of your brain that plan long sentences. That's why, in the moment you most need to speak calmly, your body makes it hardest to speak at all. It's not sabotage. It's miscalibration. Here is the lie, stated plainly. The lie is that the feeling of fear is information about the future. It isn't. Fear is information about your nervous system's threat detector firing. That's all it is. It doesn't know if the threat is real. It doesn't know if you'll survive it. It doesn't know the odds. It fires the same intensity whether you're about to be fired or about to be embarrassed, whether you're facing a wild animal or a difficult phone call. Your body cannot distinguish catastrophe from discomfort. It only knows elevated and not elevated. So when fear tells you to stay quiet, really stay quiet, the kind that means shrink, disappear, give up your position, it is not giving you wisdom. It is giving you an alarm with no context. And an alarm with no context is not something you obey. It's something you investigate. This is where the 2 silences split apart for good, and you need to understand this difference in your bones, because the rest of your life depends on which one you practice. There is the silence of surrender. That silence comes from believing the fight is already lost, so why waste words? It withdraws energy from the outcome. It stops caring what happens because caring hurts too much. That silence gets smaller every day. It has no target. It is a slow leak, not a held breath. Then there is the silence of aim. That silence comes from redirecting energy, not losing it. It's the stillness of someone who has decided the next word, the next move, the next action has to count, so it isn't spent carelessly. That silence has a target. It's not avoiding the conflict. It's choosing its terrain. Watch an animal that hunts for a living. It doesn't sprint the whole field, announcing itself the entire way. It goes still. Every muscle stays loaded, not limp. Its eyes don't leave the target. That's not fear. That is the most focused version of that animal that exists. If you only saw the stillness, you'd think it was doing nothing. You'd be wrong in a way that would cost you everything, if you were the target. Your silence, the one you've built over months or years without realizing what you were building, might be exactly that. Loaded stillness. Eyes on target. Not the slow leak of giving up, the deliberate hold of someone deciding exactly when to move. Here's how you tell them apart, in yourself, honestly. Surrender silence feels heavy and directionless. It has no next step attached to it, it's just absence. You can sit in it for a year and nothing inside you changes, there's no pressure building because nothing is loading. Aim silence feels tense in a different way. There's a pressure to it, a coiled quality. Something in you is tracking, watching, refining. You can feel, even if you can't name it yet, that there's a moment coming where the stillness ends and the movement means something. If you're honest with yourself right now, in this exact stretch of your life, I think you'll find you're closer to the second one than the voice wants you to admit. You didn't stop caring about the outcome. You stopped broadcasting the outcome before you'd secured it. Those are opposites, not synonyms. There's a biological reason patient people beat reactive people so often, and it isn't mystical. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that does complex planning, that weighs consequences, that holds a long-term goal in mind while resisting a short-term impulse, is slow. It's metabolically expensive. It gets overridden the instant your threat system floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline. A person reacting from fear is, quite literally, running on the older, faster, dumber part of the brain. A person who has learned to sit in silence until the flood passes is running on the newer part, the one that can actually solve the problem instead of just surviving the next second of it. That's what your quiet has been training. Not weakness. Not disappearance. The muscle that waits out the flood so the smart part of your brain can drive again. The lie told you that fear meant stop. The truth is fear just means something matters. You don't extinguish a fire alarm by disconnecting the wires, you check if there's a fire, and if there isn't, you keep moving through the smoke of the false alarm anyway. That's what you've been doing, this whole quiet stretch. Moving through smoke that isn't fire. Most people run from the alarm itself. You learn to check for the actual flame before you reacted to the noise. That's not a small thing. That is the entire difference between people who get controlled by their fear and people who use it as information and keep walking. The ones who made it. Let me tell you about people who were terrified, and quiet, and still made it, because you need to see this pattern isn't rare. It's the actual mechanism behind almost every comeback story you've ever respected. There was a boxer, cut from his high school football team for being too small, too slow, not enough. He didn't respond with a speech. He didn't respond with a scene. He went quiet and started running at 4 a.m. before anyone else was awake to see him fail. Nobody was watching those runs. There was no audience for the years before the audience existed. When people finally saw him fight, they called it a natural gift. They didn't see the 4 years of silent 4 a.m. miles that had nothing to do with talent and everything to do with a decision made once, in private, and repeated in silence for 1,000 mornings after. There was a writer, rejected by publisher after publisher, so many times the rejection letters became wallpaper in a spare room. She didn't call the publishers back to argue her case. She didn't post the rejections for sympathy. She went quiet, and she rewrote the same book 7 times in that quiet, alone, with no proof it would ever be read by anyone. Everyone around her assumed the silence meant she'd moved on, gotten realistic, given up the dream quietly, like people do. She hadn't given up anything. She'd stopped explaining herself to people who weren't going to publish her anyway, and put every ounce of that explaining energy into the only thing that actually mattered, the pages. There was a founder who lost his company, his savings, and most of his public credibility in the same year. The people around him expected the loud collapse, the interviews, the blame, the public unraveling. Instead, he disappeared from view almost entirely for 2 years. People assumed that silence meant defeat. Assumed he was finished. In that silence, he wasn't gone. He was in rooms nobody was watching, learning the one skill that had actually sunk the first company, testing it in small ways nobody would notice, failing privately where failing didn't cost him his name a second time. When he came back, people called it a miracle turnaround. It wasn't a miracle. It was 2 years of unwitnessed repair, done quietly on purpose, because doing it loudly the first time is exactly what had gotten him destroyed. Notice what's common in every one of these. It is never the noise that built the outcome. The noise came after, the fight, the interview, the applause, the byline. That's the part everyone sees and mistakes for the whole story. But before every one of those loud moments, there is a long, unrecorded, undramatic stretch of someone going quiet on purpose, because they understood something the people around them didn't. Energy spent explaining yourself is energy that isn't going into becoming undeniable. There's a reason this pattern repeats across every field, every era, every kind of person. It's because the world only tells you about the roar. Nobody films the crouch. Nobody claps for the aim. But the roar was never possible without it. Every comeback you've ever admired had a silent middle you weren't shown, because silence doesn't make good footage. It makes the outcome, though. Every single time. Here's what none of these people had that you might be waiting for before you'll believe your own silence counts: they didn't have proof it would work. Not one of them got a guarantee before they went quiet. The boxer didn't know he'd fight for a title. The writer didn't know book 8 would sell. The founder didn't know year 3 would be different from year 1 and 2. They went quiet without evidence it would pay off, because the alternative, staying loud, staying reactive, staying visible in their unfinished state, had already proven itself to be a dead end. You don't get proof before the discipline. You get the discipline, and the proof comes after, if it comes at all, and even then only to people who kept the aim through the parts where nothing seemed to be happening. That's the part that separates the ones who made it from the ones who didn't. Not talent. Not luck, though luck is real and uneven and I won't pretend otherwise. The separator is whether someone could tolerate being quietly unfinished in front of people who assumed the quiet meant done. Every person in this chapter tolerated exactly that, for longer than was comfortable, because they'd stopped needing the outside world to understand the aim before the shot was taken. You don't need them to understand it either. Not your family, not your old friends, not the version of you that used to explain everything before it was ready to be explained. The ones who made it stopped asking for that understanding a long time before anyone started calling them successful. The order matters. Silence, then evidence. Never the other way around. Your real story. Now I want to turn this on you directly, because everything I've said so far means nothing if you don't apply it to your own life, right now, honestly. You have a story you've been telling about your own quiet, and I'd guess it isn't kind. I'd guess it sounds something like, I used to be someone who spoke up. I used to fight for things. Now I just let things happen to me. Now I just absorb. That story casts your silence as decline. I want to hand you a different story, and I want you to test it against the actual facts of your life, not against the voice's old tape. Think about the specific moment you went quiet. Not the vague sense of it, the actual moment. Was it after a fight you lost, or after a fight you realized wasn't worth having in the form it kept taking? Was it after you gave up on something, or after you stopped needing an audience to know you were still working on it? Be honest. Most people, when they actually trace it back, find the second thing, not the first. They find a moment where continuing to perform the struggle out loud stopped serving the struggle. And they quietly, without ceremony, switched strategies. That switch gets misread by everyone around you, including yourself, because our culture only has one visible symbol for strength: volume. Loud is mistaken for strong. Calm is mistaken for weak. Reactive is mistaken for alive. Steady is mistaken for numb. It's a bad translation, and you've been reading yourself through it for longer than you should have. Here's the reframe, and I want you to actually sit with it instead of just letting it pass by like a nice sentence in a speech. Every conversation you didn't have, the one where you would have defended yourself for the 100th time to someone who was never going to change their mind, that wasn't cowardice. That was you recognizing a battle with no exit and refusing to keep feeding it. Every argument you let go instead of winning, that wasn't submission. That was you doing the math on what winning that argument would actually cost you, and deciding the math didn't work. Every time you stayed silent while someone underestimated you, that wasn't you accepting the underestimation. That was you letting it work in your favor, because a person who is underestimated gets to move without being watched. You have been quietly building something this whole time. You thought you were just getting quieter. Ask yourself what you actually know now that you didn't know at the start of this quiet stretch. Ask what you've stopped needing that you used to need: validation, an audience, a rebuttal ready at all times. Ask what you've started doing instead, in private, that nobody has clapped for yet. There is an answer to that question. Don't let the voice convince you there isn't. Your scars are not proof you lost. They are proof you were in it. Every person who has never gone quiet, who has never had a stretch where the noise stopped and the real work started, has also never built anything that required more than one loud month to finish. The things worth building all require a quiet middle. If you have scars from a long quiet stretch, that is not evidence against you. That is the receipt for the work. I want you to picture the version of you that never went quiet at all, the version who kept explaining, kept defending, kept reacting to every provocation with the same volume as the day before. That version never builds the aim. That version stays exactly as loud and exactly as stuck as they were at the start, because all their energy went out the door in noise instead of down into foundation. You didn't become that version. Something in you refused to. That refusal is not the weak part of your story. It is the only reason you have a foundation left to build on at all. Here's the harder truth, the one I won't soften. Some of your silence probably was fear, at least at first. That's allowed. Nobody switches cleanly from reactive to strategic in one afternoon. You likely spent some real time in the surrender kind of quiet before you found your way into the aim kind. That's not a disqualifying fact. That's the actual sequence almost everyone goes through. The difference between you and the person who never gets anywhere is not that you skipped the surrender phase. It's that you didn't stay there. Something in you kept working even while the fear had the wheel, and slowly, without a ceremony to mark the exact day, the fear stopped driving and the aim took over. That transition is happening in you right now, in this stretch of your life, on this date, whether or not you've named it yet. You are not the person who gave up. You are the person mid-reload. The story you've been telling about your own silence has had the wrong title the whole time. It was never the story of how I stopped fighting. It has always been the story of how I stopped wasting the fight. Rewrite it. Today. Not with a speech to anyone else, just with the quiet decision, in your own chest, to stop apologizing for a silence that has been working this whole time. The decision. Here is where the negotiating stops. You've had this conversation with yourself before, the one where you almost believe your silence has been strength, and then a day happens, and someone calls you passive, or unmotivated, or checked out, and you slide right back into believing the old story. That cycle ends today. Not because I'm telling you to feel differently. Because you're going to make a decision, right now, and hold it the way you've held your silence, without needing anyone else's permission to keep holding it. The decision is this: your quiet has a target, and you are going to name it, even if only to yourself, right now. Not a vague target. Not get better, or figure it out. A specific one. The exact conversation you're going to have when you're ready, and not one day before. The exact move you're going to make once the position is secure, and not one day before. The exact person you're going to become louder for, when the moment finally calls for volume, because there will be a moment that calls for volume, and when it comes, you will not hesitate, because you didn't waste the charge getting there. This is the part people get wrong about silence as a strategy. They think it means silence forever. It doesn't. A held breath that's never released isn't discipline, it's suffocation. The hunter that stays still forever starves. The point of the stillness was never the stillness. It was the strike. You are allowed, you are required, to have a moment where the aim becomes the shot. If you've been quiet for a year, or 5, or since you were a kid, and you have no target at the end of it, no plan for when the silence resolves into motion, then I need you to hear this clearly: that isn't aim anymore. That's just been fear wearing aim's clothes. Aim has a trigger point. Name yours. Ask yourself what has to be true before you speak. Ask yourself what has to be built before you move. Get specific. When I've saved this amount. When I've finished this body of work. When this person shows me, one more time, exactly who they are, and I no longer need to explain myself to them. When I trust my own judgment on this the way I used to trust everyone else's. Whatever it is, name it today. Not because you owe the answer to anyone else. Because a target you haven't named is a target you can't hit, and you have spent too long loading to keep firing at nothing. And once you've named it, I want you to do the second thing, the harder thing: stop explaining the weight to people who only ever understood the noise. You do not owe them a translation of your strategy. The moment you start narrating your quiet to satisfy their comfort, you've handed the timing back to them. Aim that has to explain itself constantly isn't aim anymore, it's a performance of patience, and performances collapse the second the audience stops watching. Real aim doesn't need witnesses. It needs a target and a trigger point. You already have both, or you will, the second you finish this speech and go name them. There will be a moment, I promise you this, because it has happened to everyone who has ever done this correctly. There will be a moment where the silence you've been holding meets the moment it was built for. And in that moment, you will not need to raise your voice to be heard. You will not need to perform certainty you don't feel. You will simply move, once, exactly where you've been aiming the entire time, and the people who spent years calling you quiet, calling you checked out, calling you passive, will suddenly understand, all at once, what they were actually watching. Not absence. Not weakness. A loaded, patient, exact kind of strength that never needed their applause to keep building. That moment is not owed to you by the universe. It is built, slowly, in exactly the kind of unglamorous, undocumented quiet you have already been living in. You are not waiting for permission to start. You already started. The only decision left is whether you keep pretending your silence is a problem to apologize for, or whether you finally call it what it is: aim, mid-flight, closing in on a target only you have seen clearly this whole time. Make the decision. Not someday. Now, in this exact minute, before the noise of your day comes back in and tries to convince you otherwise. Your silence was never the absence of a fight. It has always been the fight, conducted at a frequency most people are too loud to hear. Let them keep talking. You keep aiming. Oh, you Taro. If this reached something in you, you know what to do. Subscribe. Not for me, for the version of you that's going to need to hear this exact reminder again on a harder day than today. That day is coming, and this channel will be here. Share this with the one person you know who's gone quiet and is being told it's a problem. They might need to hear it from someone other than you. You didn't lose your voice. You're saving it for the one moment it's actually going to matter. This is LifeForge. Now forge yourself.